In this video, we're going to deep dive into Lewis Hamilton's lack of qualifying pace in 2024. It's currently 13.5 in favor of George Russell, the head-to-head at Mercedes, and you're going to be very interested to see some of the telemetry and the areas in which Lewis is losing lap time. We're also going to touch on his mental mindset, something I believe is holding him back. If you're interested in what my thoughts are, definitely keep watching. Alrighty guys, my name is Martin and I'm a specialist technical coach and mentor for open formula drivers. You might be wondering what that means, and that's a good question because we are going to dive into both of those components with regards to Lewis Hamilton. That is the coach and the mentor. Now, coach is obviously technical. That's where we're going to look at the line, the braking, the throttle introduction, the downshifting, use of engine braking, trail braking, and so on. And mentor is the mindset, the framework, the doubt, the belief or lack thereof that Lewis might be experiencing at this point in his career. Now, I'm going to start this video by saying this is in no way a criticism towards Lewis Hamilton. He's obviously one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time, and we need to put some respect on his name. That said, I am going to press up against the areas where I think he might be lacking either technically or mentally, as I mentioned before, but I do believe it's the latter, and let's dive into that right now. Now, the reason that I believe it's the latter is because Lewis Hamilton hasn't forgotten how to drive, guys. Lewis is one of the greatest of all time. He has won in 2007 all the way up to 2024 across different eras, cars, teammates, the whole lot. So I don't think he's forgotten how to drive. And I also don't think that it's a lack of understanding or lack of knowledge. Now, it would be different if this is a new driver who's coming in. And then I would say, okay, we need to look at the data and look at your technique. But with Lewis, I think it's slightly different. When I look at his data, and we are going to look into it as I say, I see a lack of confidence. I see a massive lack of confidence. I see doubt. I see overthinking. I see cloudiness. I see a little bit of insecurity. I see second guessing and second thoughts coming into his mind when he's driving as well. And this is totally what you don't want as a racing driver. You want to be free. You want to be light. You want to be without doubt. You want to back yourself. You want to be confident. You want to be just getting in that car, not overthinking and not being clouded by doubt or anything negative. Now, I think over the years, this has sort of crept in. It's similar to Daniel Ricciardo in a way. If you haven't seen my video on Daniel's fall and why he got sacked, then definitely go check that out. I'll leave a link in the description below. But I see Danny over the years at McLaren and Visa Cash App, in his driving, I see a lack of confidence and mistakes creeping in. And I see something similar with Lewis as well. Now, the question will be, can he get that back? And what does he need to do to get that back? Now, if I was the coach and mentor of Lewis Hamilton, as I say, I would not be looking at the technique. I would make sure Lewis is in the absolute right mind and framework and mindset in order to go driving. As I mentioned before, I just want him free to not overthink and just drive the way we know he can drive. He obviously has the talent. It's there within him. He's won 7 world championships. He belongs in the sport, but it just needs to be that he gets in the car and he's just got no doubt and he can just drive the car for what it is. Whether he needs to go skydiving the week before and then get in the car, or go surfing the week before, or play with animals, or do something that just gets him away from the sport, I think that will be the best thing for him. And he's not going to overanalyze and overthink and second guess what he's doing on track. Now, to that end, I'm hoping and I think that Ferrari is going to be a great move for him. I think a fresh start, a bright new start where he doesn't know anything about the car. He doesn't know the engineers. He doesn't know where it's lacking or where it's strong. He can just come in with a totally blank sheet. And I think that's absolutely going to help him. Now, as we jump into the telemetry, I want you to pay attention to the speed that Lewis carries into the corner. I think that in qualifying this year, 2024 against George Russell, that is where most, if not all of the lap time is being lost, in addition to a few other confidence pieces or mistakes around the track. What George is doing is actually coming out of the brake pedal a little bit earlier and initiating the steering a little bit earlier, and he's carrying more speed into the corner. Remember, in our Max Verstappen video, we said there's only 3 ways to find lap time. That is under braking or braking as late as possible, carrying speed in or carrying speed out. If I had to attribute one particular area where Lewis is losing the lap time, it is the carrying of speed into the corner. To give a quick summary into the areas that we are going to dive into, I've got them on my notes here as I was looking at the data before. We've got Netherlands turn 1, just how he comes out of the brake pedal and also his throttle introduction on the exit of turn 1. He loses something like 0.2 in there. The high speed turn 7, a throttle lift similar to Daniel Ricciardo versus Yuki Tsunoda, exact same issue. Monza turn 1, George starts coming out of the brakes a little bit earlier there as well. Into the Parabolica, I see George coming out of the brakes earlier and carrying more speed into that corner as well. Baku turn 7, same thing. George is coming out of the brake earlier and carrying more speed in. And then you've got Baku turn 15. George braking significantly later than Lewis, and it's not often that you'll see Lewis Hamilton outbroken by his teammate. And then we've got Silverstone, where we've got Beckett and Stowe, where similar to Netherlands turn 7, Lewis is just giving big lifts of the throttle and getting out of the throttle quite a lot in these high-speed corners. He's losing momentum down the subsequent straights. Alrighty, let's take a look at the first example. So it's going to be 2024 Netherlands Dutch Grand Prix. Even though I've seen this data before and I've made my notes, I am going to go through it afresh with you guys now so that you can just follow my logic, follow my way of thinking, follow my investigation process. You're going to learn about how to read telemetry. You're also going to learn what to look for and what it means. So I am going to make this as organic as possible. And if I make mistakes, my apologies as we go through. All right, so we got Hamilton and Russell, 2024 Netherlands. We're going to pick two comparable laps. So we've got these two here. So it's going to be the 10.5 and the 10.9. And we're going to bring them up. So Lewis Hamilton is in white in 10.9. George Russell nearly half a second quicker, the 10.5. The track map gives you the areas where one teammate is quicker than the other. You can see in turn 1, which is one of our focus areas, that's highlighted in that teal aqua green that corresponds to George, who found time on the way in there. Now, if we look at the delta is the first point of call. That's going to tell you where time is being won or lost. Anytime it goes up, that's in George Russell's favor. And anytime it goes down, that's in Lewis's favor. And you can see that at the end, they finish 4.43 in George's favor. So this then into turn 1 is a massive loss of time for Lewis straight away. Before the lap is even got on the way, he's the best part of 0.3 down. And that's an area on my notes which I'm saying we need to look into a little bit further and see what's going on. The first thing you'll be presented with is the speed trace. And you can see under braking, look at the difference in speed that George is carrying into the corner. It's exactly what I mentioned before as one of my key focus areas and key topics for Lewis, carrying speed into the corner. And that's why you see this huge delta that we don't normally see here. Now, what I would love to see would be the brake release, which unfortunately this data doesn't give us. It only shows us when it's on or off. So we can only look at the point at which they're braking. We can't see to what magnitude. But given that George is the one with the speed advantage going in the corner, I can see that he's done his braking and he's now in the trail braking phase, turning in, and he's sweeping in and carrying more speed into the corner. So that's the first thing to note. The other really, really, really important thing to note is have a look at the throttle. Now, keep in mind that Lewis has gone in a little bit more gentler and he's the first one on the throttle on the way out. So you can see that in white here, Lewis on the throttle on the way out. But have a look at the way that the two drivers are introducing the throttle. Lewis gets on it earlier, but he's so passive. And you can see that by the shape of his line. You see the angle here, it's just kind of coming across at like 45 degrees. But when George gets on the throttle, it goes up really fast and hard. And as it turns out, George is the one that gets to full throttle first, even though he gets on throttle significantly later. There's a point in time in which it's George at 100% full throttle, he's flat, and Lewis is still putting his foot down, even though he started all the way down here. So this is a massive, massive, massive confidence issue. Lewis is not comfortable to carry speed into the corner. He's also not comfortable to get on the throttle and get out of the corner. He's actually losing time in both places here. And in the end of it all, he's down the best part of 0.3 after one corner. The lap is over. All right, now let's have a look at turn 7 together. So we need to zoom out here and go into the high speed turn 7. Have a look at the speed trace here. You've got George in the aqua, remember? And look at the difference in speed. We don't even need to zoom in for you to observe the difference there. There's a point at which George is doing around 264K and Lewis doing 254K. So about 10 kilometers per hour of additional apex speed for George. Have a look at the delta just creep up and stay up. So that's an advantage to George that is never repaid back through that high speed corner. Let's zoom in and have a look. And this is where the damage is being done. You see the delta go up here and then it's all in the throttle, because what happens is George does a shallower lift, and that is he only lifts back to about 50%. So he's only lifting half throttle, like half off the throttle, turning in and sweeping in, carrying more speed into the corner. Lewis, unfortunately, he's lifting the best part of 65% out of the throttle, only carrying 30% of throttle through this corner, and then has to get on throttle a little bit harder. So George's lift is a lot more gradual. He's keeping the aerodynamics a lot more stable. He's got more confidence in that corner. And really, really, really interesting. Check this out. The next row, you see there's a brake actually being shown for Lewis as well. So he's just touched the brake on the way in as he's gone into this high speed corner. There is no brake trace for George at all. I do not see an aqua colored brake trace into that corner. George has just had a lift and gone in, where Lewis has just been a bit nervous, a bigger lift and a little bit of brake being recorded there as well. So that's the confidence piece here that we're talking about in high speed corners. This time it's turn 7 in Netherlands. All right, the next example we have is going to be in Monza. So let's bring up the Italian Grand Prix qualifying. And these two races were back to back as well. So Russell out qualifying the Ferraris and George there. Lewis there just getting in front of the Red Bulls. So we've got a 19.4 and a 19.5. So they're quite close here. But I am just going to press up against the areas where he's losing lap time. Again, in Aqua, you've got turn 1 and the Parabolica and through Ascari. Just parts of the Lesmos as well, where George is getting the upper hand here. So let's zoom out and have a look at the delta. And whenever it's up, that's going to be in George's favor. And again, have a look at a massive spike here into turn 1 that's not being repaid back to Lewis on the exit. So now that we've got 2 turn 1s, we need to be asking the question, is it a confidence thing, or is it a front brake temperature thing, or a front tire thing, or tire preparation issue? Because actually later in the lap, they're pretty dead equal up to here. So Lewis just made a mistake in the Parabolica, and we're going to have a look at that. But this is not a good way to start the lap. So let's have a look at what's going on here. Alrighty. So you can see here that there's a point in the corner at which George is just carrying more speed. So it's 176 kilometers versus 159 kilometers. Again, that's just George coming out of the brake pedal a little bit earlier and starting to turn in and carry that speed into the apex of the corner. Their apex speeds are very similar, 74, 75, that's exactly bang on. But George is carrying more into the first part of the chicane. That is the right-hander. So you can see that there. Now let's just zoom out and have a look at the Parabolica, because they were dead equal going into the final corner of the Parabolica, and George is the one that ends up 3/4 of a tenth better. So let's zoom in on the Parabolica. And again, you can see that in the braking phase, when the speed is coming off and they're still braking, at this point, they're trailing out of the brakes and sweeping into this Parabolica. That's where the damage is being done in the Delta. Again, you can't see that here on the brake trace because it only shows us when it's on or off. But I can tell by the speed that George is just carrying more speed into the corner. Now, when they get on the throttle, everything looks fairly similar. They're getting on throttle in a similar fashion, but all the damage is being done. Now, George, critically, he carries also a higher apex speed, 214 versus 207. And in the middle of a fully loaded corner like Parabolica, that's going to give you a little bit more downforce as well. The 7 kilometers is worth a little bit more grip as well for George. Now, the theme so far, guys, is that Lewis is not getting out of the brake pedal quick enough and carrying speed into the corner. We've seen that Netherlands turn 1, Monza turn 1, and Monza Parabolica as well. So let's jump now to Baku, and you can see these races are in succession. We just did Netherlands, Italian Grand Prix, and Monza. We're going to go to Baku and have a look at the qualifying there as well, where again, George is getting the upper hand against Lewis. And it's at this point where Lewis is saying, I'm just not a good qualifier. I'm struggling. I think it's a confidence piece. All right, let's have a look at Baku turn 7, and it's this corner down here. Now we've got the Delta for reference as well, and look at it just climbing. Here is a massive climb for George that's never repaid back, and that puts him half a second ahead from 3/10. So there's 2/10 over here as well. And I'm just going to have a look through this section as well, because George was only a tenth up, as you can see where that cursor is, and then it goes to 2.5 tenths. So he's lost 1.5 tenths in this section, and this is the castle section in Baku, guys, where it's extremely tight. And again, we see that speed being carried in by George here. Very similar to what we saw in Netherlands turn 1, Monza turn 1, and Parabolica. George coming out of the brakes and going in with speed and confidence, finding him the best part of 1.5 tenths on the entry into the castle section. All right, let's have a look at the other part of that Delta over here, where it just climbed and was never repaid back. And in this particular case, I don't think it's got to do with the way George is coming out of the brake pedal, because we see this difference in speed right at the point at which the speed starts coming down. That is the braking point. So previously we saw it start to come, like George's increase in speed start to come in the second part of this speed decreasing area. but actually it's now happening from the top. So this is a breaking point. And given George is the one in aqua and Lewis is in white, have a look at their breaking points. You can see that George with the throttle is driven clean past Lewis's breaking point and has outbroken Lewis into turn 15. That's this corner here where you see a lot of mistakes. It's the second last corner before this is the last corner on the run onto Baku. So George just more confidence under braking. And like I said previously, this is very unusual, like to see Lewis Hamilton being outbroken, and he's lost from 314 to 520. He's lost 0.2 of a second in one corner just like that. All right, the last track we're going to have a look together is going to be Silverstone. Now, even though Lewis won here, there's just some confidence that I can see in the data where Lewis is not his usual self around Silverstone, that's for sure. Now, we've got to say that George has done an amazing job here. Like this at 25.8 against the 25.9 around one of Lewis's stronger tracks in Silverstone. So full credit to George, by the way. We haven't said that in this video up to this point. But check this out, guys. So we've got Copse, Maggots, Beckett's, the S's here. And in this section here and here, at the end of the hanger straight, that's Beckett's and Stowe. I want you to have a look at the speed trace and have a look at the delta, which just climbs up in those sections. You can see a little climb here and then full throttle and another little climb here. So we're going from sort of, you know, nothing to nearly 1.2 tenths down through this section. And just to remind you guys, that's through Beckett's, down the hanger straight and into Stowe. Now into these corners, guys, you just need to lift and keep the car nice and settled. And it's all about momentum. You keep momentum, you keep downforce, you keep minimum speeds, you keep everything active, and you carry that speed down the hanger straight and on the exit into the final chicane here as well. So these little jumps in deltas is just costing Lewis time and money. Let's have a look at those as well. All right, so we've got George in green and Lewis in white. You can see this additional speed being carried on the way in both cases. Both of these high-speed corners, delta is being in George's favor. It's similar to Netherlands turn 7 that we looked at before. These are corners where you need to lift and click a downshift, and Lewis is just getting out of the throttle way too much. So in this particular case, Lewis 2%, so he's almost completely off the throttle through Beckett's. Whereas George, the minimum is 27%, so he can maintain a higher speed. Again, the theme is here, carrying speed into the corner, Lewis. Now, the second thing we're going to have a look at is Stowe. That's the right-hander down the end of the hanger straight. Exactly the same thing happens. George still maintaining 25% throttle. You can see there where my cursor is. And Lewis 4%, he's almost fully out of the throttle. Again, there's a small jump in delta. Again, George carrying speed on the way into the corner. So there you go, guys. We see recurring themes of carrying speed into the corner. And we see the confidence with the big throttle lifts, taking big chunks out of the throttle in high-speed corners like Beckett's, Stowe, and turn 7 in Netherlands as well. Now, look, does Lewis know this? Well, I'm sure he does. He's got a massive team of thousands of people behind him. They've got a lot more information than me. I'm 100% sure they know exactly where the time is being lost. But what can they do about it? And that's the question. That's what I was trying to talk about earlier on in this video. What is it if it's not technique, or Lewis knows it's technique? Like, I'm sure he looks at this data and goes, yeah, that was too big of a lift. Or yeah, didn't carry enough speed into that corner. If they keep focusing on technique, I think you're knocking at the wrong door. Need to just get Lewis feeling happy, feeling confident in the car, feeling comfortable with the balance. And once those boxes are ticked, you'll just see the magical explosion and the greatness that is Lewis Hamilton once again. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe, give me a comment and a thumbs up as well. Share this to a friend who might find it interesting, and I'll see you in the next one.